Hello everyone. In today's video, we're diving into the mysteries and scandals surrounding Cleopatra's love life, a historical figure known not only for her intelligence, but also for her fascinating personal life. We're going to explore the stories about her relationships, including marriages with her brothers and her romances with influential Roman leaders, and even dig into the surprising legend that she owned a vibrator made of bees. Cleopatra was truly a master at using her cunning and sexual appeal to consolidate her power, a skill that still sets her apart today. But was she really the seductress that many imagine? Or was there more to her story than the accounts suggest? Stay with us as we uncover how Cleopatra navigated the complex dynamics of power and sexuality of her time, and what this tells us about her enigmatic personality. Let's get started. There's an old legend that involves Cleopatra and her rather unusual intimate practices. It's said that she invented a primitive type of vibrator using a hollow gourd filled with angry bees. This curious innovation wasn't her only eccentric method. In other stories, she supposedly sat on boxes filled with enraged bees to stimulate herself. But Cleopatra wasn't alone in these uncommon behaviors. Other accounts from that time describe Egyptians incorporating animals into their sexual practices, with men and women engaging with dogs and cattle. The extravagance didn't stop there. The ancient Egyptians also knew how to include crocodiles in their sexual acts, and even used the dung of these animals as a contraceptive method. As for Cleopatra, her mastery of love techniques was so renowned that the Greeks gave her the nickname Myriokane, meaning the one who opens up to 10,000 men. An even bolder legend claims that she once performed oral sex on 100 men in a single night. These stories, though likely more mythical than historical, highlight Cleopatra's legendary figure in a context of sexual fascination and mystery. Cleopatra, an iconic figure in Egyptian history, was the daughter of the Macedonian king Ptolemy XIV Olitz, who took the throne of Egypt in 80 BC. The royal lineage, including Cleopatra, often featured cases of inbreeding, a common practice among Egyptian rulers to preserve the purity of their dynasty. Although Cleopatra's mother isn't definitively known, she might have been either a concubine of the king or his own sister wife, Cleopatra V Tryphena. The tradition of marriages within the family, including unions between siblings, was a norm in ancient Egypt. Cleopatra was no exception to this rule. After her father's death, she married her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, who was around 10 to 12 years old at the time. This marriage, as required by Egyptian law, was arranged so that Cleopatra would have a male co-ruler. Moreover, Cleopatra is well known for using her influence and charisma in significant diplomatic relationships, including with powerful figures like Julius Caesar, with whom she skillfully forged a strategic alliance that strengthened her power and political position. Cleopatra started her political journey with bold moves, like issuing documents in her own name and putting her image on coins, pushing her brother Ptolemy XIV into the background. This situation lasted for 3 years, until Ptolemy managed to exile Cleopatra. While in exile in Syria, she quickly charmed Julius Caesar, the powerful Roman general, with whom she plotted her return to power in Egypt. With Caesar's help, Cleopatra reclaimed the throne. And after the death of Ptolemy XIII, she married her other younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, with whom she co-ruled until his death in 44 BC. After becoming a widow, Cleopatra began to rule with Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar. The queen was also famous for her extravagant parties that lasted for days and were full of sensuality, especially those she threw with her notorious lover Mark Antony, where celebration and opulence were always on full display. At the height of her influence, a group called the Inimitable Livers, or the Society of Inimitable Livers, emerged, known for their hedonistic devotion to pleasure and extravagance. In Alexandria, this group indulged in wine-soaked parties, gambling, and daring theatrical performances, often in honor of the god Dionysus. It wasn't uncommon to see people dancing naked at these events, a true celebration of excess. This story intertwines with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, in a lesser-known but equally intriguing episode. During a temporary separation from her Roman lover Mark Antony, who was campaigning in Armenia, Cleopatra visited Judea. There she met Herod the Great, who already harbored disdain for her due to territorial disputes stirred up by Antony. Despite the palpable hostility, Cleopatra risked a meeting that could be seen as seductive with Herod. The historian Josephus suggests that this encounter might have had a romantic element, but it's more likely that it was a calculated move by Cleopatra to trap Herod, trying to extract advantages from him through a conversation that flirted with the idea of adultery. Although Cleopatra was deeply in love with Herod, he found himself in a dilemma when faced with her romantic advances. Unsure of how to proceed, Herod gathered a group of advisors to discuss whether Cleopatra should be eliminated due to her seemingly treacherous moves. After some deliberation, the council decided that killing Cleopatra could provoke Antony's wrath, so they advised Herod against taking that course of action. Instead, Herod decided that the most sensible approach was to remove Cleopatra from the political scene in a less drastic way, by escorting her back to Egypt. There, Cleopatra's influence over Mark Antony remained as strong as ever. Their romance began around 40 BC, shortly after they formed a political alliance. Antony spent some time living in Alexandria alongside Cleopatra before returning to Rome to marry Octavia, the sister of Emperor Octavian. However, the call of his heart proved stronger, and he returned to Egypt to be with Cleopatra, with whom he had 3 children. The relationship between Octavian and Antony kept deteriorating as they competed for control of the Roman Empire. The scandalous lifestyle that Antony and Cleopatra led, along with the disregard for Octavia, only fueled the flames of political tensions even further. The tensions between Octavian and Mark Antony came to a head in 32 BC, when Octavian declared war on Cleopatra and stripped Antony of his powers. Cleopatra's beauty is a topic that still sparks heated debates today. While Roman writers described her as a stunningly beautiful woman who took pride in her appearance, other sources question whether much of what was said about her beauty was simply propaganda. The coins from that era, which depict Cleopatra with distinctive features like a prominent nose and a strong chin, suggest a less idealized image. It's possible that Cleopatra chose to present herself with these strong features to convey power rather than beauty. While Hollywood has painted Cleopatra as a beauty icon, her real strength seemed to be her charm, intelligence, and ability to use her image strategically. If Cleopatra wasn't actually attractive, her contemporaries surely would have pointed it out, especially since they didn't hold back when it came to defaming her, even calling her a prostitute. If they were willing to insult her morals, they certainly wouldn't have spared her looks if they had found them lacking. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, often faced harsh criticism from Roman figures. Her influence over Roman leaders and the notoriety of her intimate relationships made her a constant target in the literature and historical writings of the time. During Octavian's reign, unfavorable comparisons were often made between Cleopatra and Octavia, the emperor's sister and Mark Antony's abandoned wife. Cleopatra was frequently portrayed as a greedy and indulgent figure, in stark contrast to the virtuous Octavia. The criticism against Cleopatra reached extreme levels in some writings. The poet Sextus Propertius from the 1st century BC described her as a woman consumed by her own passions. The poet Juvenal went even further, claiming that she would visit brothels in disguise at night, while the historian Cassius Dio depicted her as a woman with uncontrollable appetites, both sexual and material. Her relationship with Julius Caesar was also widely criticized, marked by accusations of adultery. Cleopatra, known for her unconventional methods of seduction, found a bold way to get close to Julius Caesar by secretly being smuggled into his presence, wrapped in an object that varies in stories. It could be a bed sack, a rug, or a mattress. During this initial meeting, she managed to capture Caesar's interest despite their age difference and their respective marriages. She was a 21-year-old married to her brother Ptolemy XIV, while he was around 50 years old, already in his 3rd marriage to Calpurnia. Their marital commitments weren't enough to stop the romance, which soon led to the birth of a son, Caesarion. Driven by her bond with Caesar, Cleopatra traveled to Rome in 45 BC. Accompanied by another brother, Ptolemy XIV, who was also her co-ruler. She stayed in Rome until shortly after Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, at which point she returned to Egypt. Later, when Octavian rejected her attempts at an alliance, Cleopatra chose a tragic end, taking her own life. After Mark Antony's defeat and his subsequent suicide, Cleopatra was determined to seduce Octavian to secure her political survival. The Queen of Egypt, now a prisoner, managed to arrange a meeting with the Roman conqueror. In her moment of desperation, Cleopatra transformed her surroundings into a scene of opulence and desire, decorating it with luxury and choosing mourning attire that highlighted her enigmatic beauty. During the meeting, she didn't just rely on her looks and charm. She also played on emotional memories by placing pictures of Octavian's father nearby and holding letters he had written. With a soft voice and captivating gazes, Cleopatra tried to enchant Octavian with her seductive words. However, Octavian, focused on his own political ambitions, resisted her temptation. He planned to take her to Rome, not as his lover, but as a war trophy for his triumph. Frustrated and out of options, Cleopatra chose to end her life, sealing her fate in a tragic manner.